Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joy Moses, and I am joined today by my colleague, Andrew Hall. We both work with the National Alliance to End Homelessness on the homelessness research with the Homelessness Research Institute at the Alliance. We're going to proceed shortly with the topic for today's session, contributing to how race and gender are defined within homelessness. I'm just going to briefly pause as people are joining the session. Okay. Alrighty, so I'm going to get started. Again, my name is Joy Moses. We're gonna just launch in and jump in to today's topic. And we will be answering questions as we go along. If you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. We also encourage people to use the chat function. That is an opportunity for you to share ideas with one another about this project, but also any thoughts that you may have for us at the Alliance on how we can better support you or support these efforts around this project. So I'm now going to talk about the project so that all is a little bit clearer, but I'll also do some reminders as I go along. So this effort is focused on basically HUD's proposed new data elements. As many of you know, HUD has data elements that are associated with HMIS and questions that are asked at intake. They have been going through a very deliberative process in recent months to think of ways of reforming those data elements and those questions. And at the end of that, or at this point in the process, they have some proposed new language. And that is at the root of why we're here today and what you'll be hearing a little later in the session. I just wanted to start by level setting and sharing information about the proposed new data elements. So essentially they are focused on the areas of race and ethnicity and gender. And the changes that have been suggested are around how people are able to identify themselves. So when people are engaged in the intake process, they're asked questions about their race and ethnicity. The proposed changes would essentially drop the ethnicity category and allow people who are Hispanic or Latino to identify that grouping as a racial category. They would also be able to choose a racial category as well. So one of the more traditional racial categories as well. So to be more specific, there would be one question. It would ask, what is your race? And they would be able to say Hispanic and Latino, Hispanic/Latino, and white. So they would be able to check more than one box. There is an additional new category for Middle Eastern or North African people that is proposed to be added. And importantly, at the end of choosing from the various categories available, individuals would be able to add additional details that they could fill in. So they might want to add a nationality or a tribal affiliation. So once again, by example, if I were filling out the form, maybe I would look at the racial categories and I could say, I am Black or African American, and then I could also add, if I wanted to, a nationality. If I were from an African or Caribbean nation. So those are the primary changes to the race and ethnicity category. Also proposed is a new preferred language question with various options available, including an option to fill in a response if your preferred language is not on the pre-existing list. Finally, I'll talk about the gender category. There have been some proposed shifts there as well. Currently, people are asked to choose to identify themselves as female or male. Those categories have been changed to woman/girl or man/boy. The transgender question has been pulled out into a separate one that asks if the individual has transgender experience. There's another option to identify a culturally specific identity. And finally, if your identity is not listed, you're able to fill it in. I'm briefly going over these changes. There is definitely more information available about them through our website, but also the very best primary source is HUD's website. They have briefs and other materials that explain the proposed changes. In addition to releasing these proposed changes, HUD has asked COCs and communities across the country to help in collecting feedback on these proposed changes. And has put out materials related to that as well. We at the Alliance wanted to help with this process and contribute to making it easier for you if you want to participate. So essentially, you can go through the process of developing your own surveys or your own surveys or other ways of collecting feedback. There could be various approaches. But we thought it would be helpful if we created some surveys that you could use in order to participate. So we did create a survey that you could administer to clients, asking them how they feel about the change data elements. Also questions that could be asked of intake workers, individuals who have been administering or trying out the new data elements with clients, asking them their opinions about how that's working. So those are the first two things we're making available. Also to help with this whole endeavor, we are offering to process all the surveys and summarize any results that come in. So we are trying to take some of the lift off by doing some of the thought work on how you can collect feedback, and then also processing that feedback and being willing to share that back with you, as well as with HUD, the agency that is putting out the request for feedback. There's a couple other things that we thought about when we were developing the surveys for this effort. The first is revisiting the reasons why we're collecting racial and gender data. Specifically, we know that a lot of us are interested in it because we think that race and gender may matter to the reasons why people are homeless, and to a certain extent, the reasons why they are not able to exit homelessness. So we thought this was a good opportunity to ask them their views on the degree to which racial and gender discrimination or racial and gender dynamics contributed to their homelessness. The second thing is, it's not lost on us as we were thinking about the idea of changing the questions that we ask people experiencing homelessness, that we could use that process to contribute to a larger conversation about the way that we ask people questions. Specifically, we ask people experiencing homelessness a battery of questions related to triage, most notably and recently through the VI SPDAT. And then we also ask them questions for our tracking purposes within HMIS. And there's been various debates and discussions about how many questions we're asking, do we need to ask all these questions? So we added a question about how many questions people should be answering. So it might seem counterintuitive, but the goal of us asking the questions in this context is to move in the direction of asking people less questions. We have a couple of things that we want to highlight. As I mentioned, we want to ensure that people who are experiencing homelessness and who are doing intake work in the field are responding to surveys about the proposed data elements. Many of you on this webinar are probably not in those groups. You may be a representative of a COC or a program or otherwise connected with systems or this work. But we want to ask you to have some involvement in this project. Specifically, we're going to ask you to make some initial decisions that my colleague Andrew will discuss shortly. And then we are hoping that you will help engage and inform intake workers about this project and be a bridge from us to them. Finally, we would be asking you to provide intake workers with the survey link where they can both help people experiencing homelessness fill out the survey, but also fill out the survey themselves after they spent some time administering the new data elements or the new race and gender questions to people at intake. So I'm going to transition here and turn the floor over to my colleague, Andrew, who's going to talk about some of the decisions that you would want to make as you're getting started with this project.
Hello, everyone. So as Joy said, I'm going to be talking about some of these decisions that you may face when you're thinking about how to go about doing this trial. And the three main themes here. One of the most important considerations is, of course, what you are, able to do given, your workload and your resources. Thinking about what's feasible. And also, ultimately, our goal is to capture the voices of people who are experiencing homelessness from the different types of surveys that and the questions and the information that we're asking about. So that's also the most important thing, and we'll dig into that a little bit later on what the best way to do that is. But we also like to underscore that there's different ways of doing this. There's obviously the ideal, but we also don't want to make the perfect be the enemy of the good. And there's obviously going to be many different ways that people can still participate, and we'd still like to invite you to participate, even if you're not able to do the every single part of it. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Andrew.
Oh no, it's okay. So first question that you might want to think about when you're thinking about how to put on this trial is, first of all, how many intake workers would you involve in this process? So obviously the more the better, but of course, if you can involve everyone or a lot of people, one approach could just be looking at different shifts that people are working in, intake workers at a particular location, or some other criteria that you think of that would be feasible for your community. Secondly, as we were talking about before, our major goal here is to get the feedback from people who are experiencing homelessness. And so one question that you might want to think about is, how many people would you be able to survey? Again, the more the better, but the idea here is to capture a representative sample of everyone who's going through your system. And so our preference would be to do some sort of random selection. So instead of selecting based on characteristics like looking at older adults or looking only at people with families, one way to do it might be to choose every third or fifth person who's coming through the coordinated entry process. And again, that way would be how to capture a more representative sample of everyone who's going through this process. Another decision point that you might want to consider is how long you might want to run this trial for. So ideally, the longer the better, but we do have a fixed endpoint. The last day that we would provide feedback on our end will be December 31st of 2022. So it's really just the start date that then would be up to you. And again, it would, the longer this could happen and the more data that you would be able to collect would be best. But we completely understand if that isn't a long time. So whenever you're able to start, it would also really work. And then another question is, which alliance materials would your community use? So ideally, your intake workers would help clients complete the client survey, and then themselves would take the intake worker survey based on that interaction. But of course, if taking the client survey isn't possible, we're recommending or suggesting that intake workers could have one-on-one conversations with clients or engage in group conversations with clients and take notes based on that, and then share the feedback from those interactions in their own intake worker surveys that they take afterward.
So I'm just going to pick up from here and briefly go over the anticipated steps overall for this project. So again, we're starting from the point where HUD has released some proposed or trial data elements, new questions on race and gender, and now language that clients may come to answer someday. And we just want to collect feedback. So a good way for you to help with the feedback process is to help with this project. And a good way to start there is to review some of the materials you have that are available. Attending this webinar is a very good start. You can also visit our website. We'll provide a link in the chat where you can go to a landing page and see more about the project and also collect materials. We will ask you to leave behind your contact information. That just helps us stay connected to you and get an understanding of who is interested in participating. So again, you could start with reviewing the Alliance's materials. You should also review the materials that were developed by HUD that explains this transition. We have links to HUD's materials on our webpage as well. The second thing you would want to do is to resolve the decision points that Andrew just went over, which is, how many intake workers, how many people experiencing homelessness are we going to reach out to? Then a necessary next step from there would be to reach out to those intake workers that you want to participate in this project and do a training of sorts. We don't want to scare people with that training word. We don't expect within the period between now and the end of this year that you're going to prepare elaborate PowerPoints and booklets and things like that. That is not what we should be thinking about, but you do have to have some way of communicating with the intake workers about the fact that HUD is considering new questions and that we want to try them out on some of our clients, some of the people experiencing homelessness, and that they should be a part of that we want them to be a part of that process, I should say. The fourth thing that would happen from there is that hopefully they begin surveying people experiencing homelessness. That means that they would first ask them the new questions, the new race and gender and language questions. They would go through those with them and then ask a couple of additional questions about how they feel about the race and gender questions, but also things about, or one question about how they, one or two questions about how they feel about our efforts to survey and solicit information from them as a whole. If that doesn't happen and it just doesn't seem possible that your system can survey clients, a lot of clients directly, as Andrew mentioned, we are urging the conversations with them between intake workers and them. And then whether the intake worker has done a lot of the client surveys or they've just talked to clients about the changed questions, once they have done either of those, we would encourage them to take a intake worker survey. From there, everything for your community ends and everything for us begins. Essentially, we will be capturing all of the survey results, and then we will be processing them and compiling them and finding ways to summarize them, and we will share them with you and possibly share them as a whole with the larger community. Typically, we've been doing some work like this in the past. Typically, we keep community names anonymous when we're doing that type of work. Obviously, if we're sharing it with you and giving you feedback about what's going on in your community, we would give you specific information. But if we were publicly reporting or reporting for other purposes, we would keep the individual community names private or anonymous. The ninth step would be that HUD, in collecting all of the feedback that we're able to give through this project, but also any other feedback that they're able to collect, they will eventually finalize the data elements, finalize the new questions that will be included within HMIS. And then maybe there's some other things that come from this work. As I mentioned, we are interested in how people feel about the whole process of asking clients questions, how many questions they're asked, what kinds of questions they don't like being asked or answered. So that could definitely lead to next steps about how we think about issues such as those. I'm gonna pause there for a moment. I noticed that we had a question earlier about will the various, this is from Nancy, will the various HMIS vendors update their software when the proposed changes are adopted? Which is a good question. I wanted to make sure that we address that. So at this trial stage, the new questions will not be incorporated into HMIS. So people who are participating in the trial would not have the benefit of the questions being in HMIS. They would be asking them on a trial basis and responding to our survey. When the questions are finalized, they would be incorporated into HMIS, and yeah, the vendors would be engaged in that process. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time. We're almost near the end of our formal presentation. We wanted to leave time for questions and comments, but I wanted to give you all a better sense of what is in the surveys. So first, I want to mention that there is one link that we're providing to get to the survey, and depending on how you answer a question about who you are and why you're using the survey, you'll be directed, you'll get different questions will pop up for you. For those who are answering questions on behalf of clients, on behalf of people experiencing homelessness, they will get one version of questions. And that version will include the proposed or the trial versions of the race, gender, and language questions. So they will ask those questions as they may eventually appear for an HMIS. There will be a question about a catch-all question if someone has any thoughts on the data elements on the new questions. So for instance, if you're going through and they're asked the race question and someone really feels a need to say, well, I don't feel like my group is represented there. I don't feel good about that. I wish that would change or something. There's an opportunity to just put in general thoughts that a person may want to share. We have asked a couple of questions about whether they feel as if their race or gender has contributed to their homelessness. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there's two questions there about basically getting to the types of questions that they do not like being asked. And also, what do they think we should be asking, or what do we need to know in order to help them find housing? The panel on the right side of the screen is a snapshot from the actual interface from SurveyMonkey that an intake worker would see if they're asking clients these questions. As you can see, some of you can see some of the wording of the actual questions on the screen as well. And then I'll say a little bit about the intake worker piece as well. So again, everybody goes through the same link, but when someone identifies themselves as an intake worker who wants to give feedback from their perspective, they'll get a different set of questions. We are going to ask them to actually go through the questions themselves that HUD is proposing. So they're going to get the questions about what is your race? Here are the new categories. What is your gender? Here are the categories, language, et cetera. So we're going to ask them to think about it from their own personal perspective as someone who is being asked those same questions that they're asking clients. And then we want to know some things that are from their unique perspectives. So their thoughts on how easily clients are able to answer the proposed questions, whether the new questions seem confusing, are they more confusing than the current questions, less confusing? And then any other, again, a catch-all option. Do you have any other thoughts to share? And I should say with these catch-all options, which are like a general square for you to fill out, you can choose to fill them out or you can skip those questions. No one is obligated to write in information. We're just giving people the option. And then we had questions about, do you think we're asking clients too many questions? Just as you just finished spending an amount of time asking them more questions, and a couple more questions than usual, but we want to know just in general, in doing homeless services work, do you feel like we're asking clients too many questions? And what types of questions do you think clients absolutely do not want to answer? And we kind of give the examples of the things that we know we ask. So do clients not like asking questions about their mental health, or maybe their interactions with the justice system, et cetera? Again, we are interested in those types of questions as we consider not only these changes to HMIS data elements, but as many of you are aware, we are rethinking in a lot of ways coordinated entry and questions that are asked as part of triage that were formerly or still are a part of the VI SPDAT in the way that we do that work. So I want to make a final note. I've said it before, but we just want to make sure that everybody knows we're trying to make this as simple as possible. There's only one link that you have to use and there's only one link to use, whether it's an intake worker taking the survey for themselves or for their clients. That is the one thing that we need to make sure gets out into the field. So we wanted to definitely spend more time with you on any questions that you may have, but also any thoughts on how we could improve this whole project. If there are just general comments about how we can make this better, how we can better support you, how you might support each other in doing this work, and any thoughts that could help make these efforts successful based on your work in the field or working with people in the field, suggestions that you might think might be helpful for your colleagues about how to make this all work well. We wanted to provide a space for that discussion as well. Again, we are monitoring the chat and the Q&A box as well. So let's spend some more time there. And we might wrap up a little early. That is fine too. We just wanted to make sure that we left time to discuss this and give an opportunity for you to touch base with us in whatever ways that can be helpful. So I guess I will continue, but Andrew, please feel free to jump in. So there's a question from Sophia about how long is each survey. I believe the client survey is 13 questions, including the question about the questions about asking them to identify their race, gender, and language preference. One of those questions is also just where are you in the country, asking to identify the city and city, town, and state. So there hopefully are some questions that are easy to fill in amongst those 13 questions, and the intake worker survey is a couple questions longer than that. But again, there's some just some background questions so that we know where you are from. We have copies of the survey questions that are on our website. So we do encourage you to look at that if you just want to just see the listing of them. We periodically may update those, although those updates won't happen much beyond the next day or so. Where can you find the surveys? Nicholas has a question. Where can you find the surveys and when do you want the feedback by? Let's see. So basically you can find them on our website. Maybe, I don't know if Andrew, you're able to put the link in the chat.
Sure.
If not, I can do that as well. And we are asking that any surveys that are going to be filled out, whether they're from clients or they're from intake workers, that they be filled out by December 31st. So we are doing this within a very short period of time. It has a lot to do with the schedule that HUD has set and needs to adhere to in order to get to their finalized questions. So we do apologize for the short time frame, but we are hoping that the various things that we're working to do to make it as easy as possible is going to help to accomplish this task within the short time frame.
I just shared the link in the chat.
Okay. Did you want to tackle any of the questions or comments in the chat, Andrew, or do you want me to continue from there? Unfortunately,
Sorry. Oh, you
a
can
little
continue.
focused on the Q&A, but I can catch up with the chat as well.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I think we're caught up with those questions. Yeah, so I shared the link to the survey. You know, as Joy mentioned, the last day to submit feedback from either or both surveys is December 31st. I think that's it so far. Oh, and we're also going to share out the webinar and the slides and the link afterwards too. So you'll have it in multiple ways. Oh, and then there was a question, do we have a suggested template on how to introduce the survey and questions to our customers?
We don't have that. If you think that's helpful, we can consider pulling something like that together. I will suggest, how about this? I will suggest that we can pull something like that together, but I would also say that if you are working on this project in your community, especially if you are engaging intake workers in developing the project, that if you come up with samples, we'll find a way to share the various samples beyond any template that we're able to create. And you can, at the end of this presentation, hopefully I noticed somebody wanted the final note, so we have that back on the screen. But at the end of this presentation, which I think I can skip to, we have our contact information. So if you develop something and you want to share it with your colleagues, you can direct it toward us and we will share it. We can also make additional materials available after this that we can develop. And then also, obviously, if you have questions, you can reach out to us as well.
So Ray had a question, when would the proposed changes on HMIS be adopted or to be determined, and how would this be announced?
When would the proposed, I'm sorry, Andrew.
Oh, no, that's okay. When would the proposed changes on HMIS be adopted or to be to be determined, and how will this be announced?
So it's my understanding that HUD is planning to finalize the questions early next year. And you would be hearing from them about it, I'm sure too, because we are invested in these issues. Once we hear about that from HUD, we will also make that information available through our channels as well. So I just want to make sure that we're not missing anything else. Thank you for your patience as we try to read through your comments. It looks like Andrew's jumping in.
Sure. Carmela asked about an ETA for the materials via email. As soon as we're done with this webinar, we're going to get this over to our comms team, but I can send you over the materials this week.
Okay. Okay. We appreciate all the comments in the chat. It's very helpful to us to see that you all are engaged. A couple of, I see Rebecca saying she's going to pass it on to her intake team. Thank you very much. Anybody else who's doing that, thank you greatly. importantly, Julie from our team, who helped in developing the surveys, mentions that they should only take a couple minutes to complete because she spent a lot of time making sure that that would be the case. We were hoping those numbers didn't seem intimidating. They really do go rapidly. And I'm sure as folks do them and they do one or two of them, they can even go quicker. They will go even more quickly as you get some practice at it. Okay. Okay, I think we're doing good on questions and comments. Oh, they're still rolling in. Okay. Okay, I see a couple more people wanting to be on the email list. Okay, this is wonderful, you all. We really appreciate your support for this project. We definitely want to make sure that that we can contribute to the process of HUD having some good information so that we can, better collect information on race and gender from people, but also some of the other issues that I had mentioned around just the whole process of asking people questions and the degree to which race and gender are important to their circumstances. Okay, I see Sophia is looking for some bullet points. Oh, I think I read that one or a similar one on how to introduce the need and input. So we will work on that. And again, other ways, if others want to contribute anything that they have that they develop around introducing these concepts to intake workers or to clients, that would be helpful, and we could share them with others as well. Okay, so I think we're okay. Would it be possible to get the survey language in an editable document? Our CLC is planning to collect feedback through a survey as well, and we'll love to see yours in one document. We do make that available on our website. Again, if you go to the landing page and submit your information, you will have access to our various materials, which includes the surveys that we've developed, links to HUD materials, and our very short packet of information to also explain how the data element changes, the proposed data element changes, and about this particular survey effort that is an offshoot of that. Okay. I think we have scrolled through a lot of the questions. I will also highlight that another external colleague, David Dirks of Home Base, has added a specific link to the HUD exchange materials and the HUD materials that we have mentioned a couple of times in this session. I would also encourage you heavily to take a look at that. If you scroll down to near the bottom of the current chat, you should be able to see that as well. And again, we also provide links to those materials on our website, and you can find them through the HUD Exchange. So I think We're going to hold for a moment longer, but we're not going to keep a lot of you unless we're getting some specific questions or thoughts. You can feel free again to reach out to us separately from this webinar, and we will continue to respond to you in relation to this project and other things. You may have been in contact with us about other things as well. That is fine too. We are the research team at the Alliance, and we always love working with you and being in contact with you. Okay. Okay, what do you think, Andrew? Did I miss anything?
Nope.
Did we
No,
miss
not at all.
anything?
And yeah, as Joy mentioned, we'll be back in touch real soon with all of these resources and references and links. And thank you so much for your willingness to help and for attending this webinar. You know, we really appreciate it.
Yes. And thank you for your patience as we scroll through questions and your chat. We're finishing a little early. You have an additional 15 minutes in your day. You could use it to read the materials that we just linked to. That would be great. And we look forward to continuing to communicate with you about this. So I think it should be afternoon for everyone. Have a good afternoon. And we hope to see you at a future webinar.